Good evening and welcome to the League of the Women Voters Presents. Our topic tonight, well, I should introduce myself. I'm Jim Robertson, I'm your moderator. And our topic tonight is online learning, online education. The intersection of technology and rising tuition costs and the weak economy has elevated interest in online learning and learning. The outlook for the future is of special note in this town dominated by brick and mortar institutions of higher education. My guests bring a variety of experiences and expertise to this topic. Dr. Angie Jacobs' doctoral dissertation at the University of Missouri is titled Academic Advising at a Distance, a case study where no face-to-face interactions occur. She has 20 years of experience in education and educational research and is director of the Research and Online Learning Institute. Beside her is Sarah Monroe. She works at Boone County National Bank, a loan officer, I think. And she completed an MBA at Columbia College, partially online. Took both in-class and online courses working on her MBA. And Scott Christensen is teaching higher education online classes at the University of Missouri. He's an adjunct professor. And owner of Kaleidoscope Consulting, which offers video conferencing. Interesting topic and one that's getting a lot of discussion these days. I'm going to start with Sarah and ask you, why did you choose online courses and what was your experience like?
Well, I took both, as you had mentioned, the in-seat courses as well as the online. I have a full-time career, so I work an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and some weekends added. Taking only in-seat classes just would have not given me the flexibility I needed in my schedule. I can't go to my boss and say I need off between 10 and 3 Monday, Wednesday, Friday and be okay with that. So online gave me a chance to finish my MBA, keep my career while I was able to juggle both at the same time. My experience with it honestly was good. It allowed me the chance to show that I had some self-accountability because that's what's needed every time with an online class. There's no professor there sitting across from you that you're afraid to disappoint. It's just you and a computer screen and names that you get vaguely familiar with over the course of 8 weeks, but you never really know. I was lucky to have done an online program in the same town as the college itself. So I often met with friends of mine that were in the same classes and would have study groups outside of just the online. So maybe I didn't have a traditional online experience, but was definitely different than my other classes that I had taken.
Did you take multiple online classes at the same time?
I alternated on different semesters. Some semesters I would only do in-seat courses. Some semesters I would do an in-seat and an online, and there were a few times where I would do multiple online courses at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Was that hard to keep up with?
Not necessarily. If you set your own schedule, I think the study skills that I had previously translated well to the online program. You needed to set your own goals. There needed to be timetables that you stuck with, and you needed to make sure that you were diligent every single day to go on and continue to complete things despite there being no one there standing ahead of you demanding it be done.
So self-discipline.
Absolutely.
What about your undergraduate?
My undergraduate degree was at Columbia College as well, and I had done that completely in seat. I think I really was only interested in the online once I had a full-time career at that point and balancing other obligations at the same time.
I expect that is indicative of a lot of non-traditional students who are trying to balance careers and school.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that is the most common criteria that we have for the students that are taking online learning. They tend to be over the age of 30. They're non-traditional students in the sense that they have full-time jobs. They have other obligations, whether it be children or other things that keep them from being able to participate in a traditional face-to-face experience.
Well, Scott, you teach online courses. Does what Sarah's description of what it takes to do well, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so, that you find that students that are doing this are highly motivated, but they are in a situation where they have something that prevents them from being in seat, and so being able to have that opportunity to do things online gives them, opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. And the courses I've taught entirely online were actually for Stevens, and they had students from all over the world. So that was kind of interesting when you had people in time zones in Germany or other places like that, that would, they would be sending you things at 4 a.m. in the morning and working on things in different times. But I think that this is, you are hearing more about this in the news, and I think that's because it's really become a great time to not only be an online learner, but an online teacher as well. There's so many tools that are available to you now. If you want to make a short YouTube video and send it out to your students, you can do that fairly easily. There's also the ability of mobile computing platforms. You probably have a smartphone where you could access your class and things like that. So you don't have to worry as much about whether students have internet access or they can get to a library where a computer is and all that kind of stuff that 20 years ago we had to say, well, this is a real barrier. Those types of technological barriers are in some ways been erased, and it's now the same things that we've always had, is how do you build good instructional design, and how do you make sure that students have the information they need in order to succeed.
Are you able to get a sense of your students as people?
Yes, you do. I think you definitely have to build that in. It isn't just simply taking the course that you would teach in a traditional classroom and just dumping that online per se. You really have to take into the mindset that you're going to have a different means of interaction, and how do you be able to get to know your students through that medium. Mm-hmm. And so different teachers have different venues for doing that. But you certainly do, and I have, even with social media type of platforms now, I know some instructors use Facebook. I don't do that, but LinkedIn is one where I still hear from my students that I've had 5 years ago, and you can see where they're at now and what they're doing, mm-hmm. and that's kind of interesting. And it's also interesting because you can get feedback from them about, was that course ever valuable to you in what you're doing now, or what would you have changed? What would you wish you have learned in that course? So,
how are you able to push participation? I mean, is that a built-in part of online courses?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily built in. I think as an instructor, you have to decide what participation is meaningful. I also did my master's degree through a distance ed program back in the 90s, back when it was, videotapes and basically a correspondence type course. And I remember for myself finding that some of the things frustrating about the instructional design, where it was like you had to post one thing today. Well, it's like, so you just posted something, right? Because you had to check that box off. So I think how an instructor actually is able to build that discussion or into the lesson is important. Now, what I like to do is, since you do have a lot of people that have work experience, is to be able to have them bring their experience into the classroom as well. And that's a great gift to you as an instructor, because you don't have to carry all the water of providing examples and
mm-hmm.
of how project management should be done right or done wrong or whatever.
And how exactly do you do that? What are the tools to bring that kind of expertise from the students?
Well, I think it's, once again, looking at how you design the curriculum, what they're contributing. So are you going to allow them to work together in teams in a virtual environment? That's kind of a little bit different too, where your team members may actually be, not know each other either. So mm-hmm. is that a way that you can structure it that it's going to be productive for them or frustrating for them? So I think it's an interesting venue. I don't know it's for all students, and I don't know it's for all instructors.
That's, Angie, a question for you. Some of the criticisms, or let's say negatives, of online classes are that faculty don't like them, students, the big picture, don't flock to them, employers don't necessarily trust online degrees. The people who like them are politicians and administrators. Politicians because they can reduce state support, and administrators because they can present offerings for less money. does your research, how does your research square with those
It doesn't
criticisms?
necessarily square with that perspective. Research that we've seen over the last 20 years associated with online learning as the technology has increased, what we've really seen is that there's a different type of person who is attracted to online learning. They tend to be a person who is more focused on their reading and writing skills. They're not necessarily as successful in their face-to-face interactions, but they're very good at reading and writing. And so they're attracted to that. And we've found that students as well as faculty are attracted to that. Those that are very good at face-to-face interactions are sometimes uncomfortable with the way the online process works, and those that are more attracted to the reading and writing are more comfortable with the online experience. The research also shows, I always like to pull out of my hat this one particular research study that it's from the U.S. Department of Education. What they did was they looked at studies from 96 to 2008. And what they were looking at was these empirical studies that had been done by researchers about online learning. And they found a number of things. And one was that students that were online tended to be more engaged, more focused, and actually had higher learning outcomes than students who were taking the very same classes face-to-face. Faculty members and staff members that were involved in online learning tended to be very positive about online learning and very interested in connecting with their students in that way versus the face-to-face. And so you find that the research does not bear out some of the perceptions that are out there.
I think it's incredibly important too that you can't just drop the syllabus that you would have had
Right.
from an in-seat course onto the online, because you're right. Maybe the reason that you're taking an online course is because you can't meet with a group,
Right.
and you can't, that having a team maybe isn't as easy as it could be. And so having times where there would be, or it would feel like perhaps that a syllabus was dropped or parts of it added from an in-seat course made it difficult at times. It's hard to write a group paper when you have people that are cities away and you can't get together and you're only communicating via email, or it's difficult to have a project where you're supposed to contribute parts but you can never
Right.
meet on Saturday mornings to get together. So I think it's especially beneficial and even maybe more engaging when you can, as an instructor, tailor that specifically to online and the needs and the differences between the people that are attracted to those programs too.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of it too is that it isn't just about, oh, this is exciting for politicians and administrators because it's all about revenue generation. Yeah, there's a lot of revenue that comes from online learning. In fact, it's a $226 billion industry, but that is no different than higher ed in general. Higher ed in general is a very lucrative revenue generating set of learning outcomes and experiences. So it's just, I always like to take a look at it and say that if you think about online learning, one of the things that you can use from it is to look at when the phone was created in the 1900s. When it was originally created, they used it strictly for business purposes. They never ever thought that it would ever be what it is now. And so what you need to think about when you're looking at online learning is it's not just that it's inferior or it's different. It's that it's a mode of communication that we're not as used to at this point. And so as time progresses, we'll begin to see what works and what doesn't work. We thought BlackBerry was going to be around forever, and now that might not be a possibility.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing with online learning.
Yeah, I've never liked that whole idea that this is going to be, cheaper. I think it's not going to be cheaper. It's going to be a way to reach people that would otherwise not have the opportunity, either because of the separation of distance or time. And it's going to be easier. It's not going to be easier. In fact, as an instructor, I'd say it's much more difficult to teach effectively online. It takes much more time to do those types of manipulations and try and think through things. And I think one of the things that is changing a lot is how the public is starting to get used to just-in-time training. So the type of YouTube videos and stuff like that. For some of my courses at the university, I'll put YouTube videos out there for my class, but it's interesting, I've got a couple that have got over 20,000 views, and I've got comments from students all over the world that are like, thanks, I was studying for my project management exam last night, and this helped, you know. And so it's interesting how, and in my business, you know, the technology field changes so rapidly, we can't just study and know a body of knowledge and have that body of knowledge go unchanged. You have to just-in-time learning. And when you start to see like Khan University and Academy and stuff like that online, it's very interesting about how we're all kind of getting used to that. I don't know, I'm going to Google it, you know, kind of thing.
Sure,
So.
sure.
Well, I think another part of that too is that what we have to remember is that in America, we're not that progressive in terms of online learning. We haven't moved that far. However, there are other countries that have been doing this since the 1970s. Athabasca University in Canada, as well as the Open University in London, England, have been around since the 1970s and were extremely successful. From the day they opened their door, they had 20,000 or more students already in their programs. And so some of the reasons that we haven't been as quick to move to online for us has been that there's different types of policies and practices that have inhibited us as a country from being able to pursue that. And so that's why, in some respects, it's not where we would like it to be, but we certainly can learn from all these other opportunities that have happened in all these other countries.
Let me clarify something here. The universities you mentioned that were ahead of, that were doing this in the 70s, weren't doing it online.
No, they were doing it in the precursor. They were
Okay,
doing
the
it,
correspondence
yeah.
kind of,
The thing you have to remember about online learning is the newest configuration of correspondence
Yeah,
courses
distance.
from the 1700s.
So we can call that distance learning
Right.
instead
Yeah.
of, I got
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. But even then, they were already using TV and interactive videos in the 70s.
Yeah.
So.
And one of the neat things is now is that you can take an asynchronous, you know, online course that we've kind of been mentioning mainly here, and supplement it with synchronous means. So Skype is very common now. People know what that is. They use it to talk to their relatives. So students can Skype with each other. They can Skype with the teachers. Some teachers will have times, office hours, right, where you could Skype in. And so that's, you know, like I said, I think it is getting easier in some ways to bring some of the same types of interactions you would have in a traditional classroom to the online environment to supplement it and make it more widely available to a larger body or larger audience.
Sarah, did you find that you were able to interact with your instructor enough and easily enough?
Most of my instructors were very good about responding to emails and in a timely fashion. Of course, having had classes both ways, there's a lot to be said about speaking with your professor face to face and working through a problem together right then and there. You know, I know being frustrated on a problem and to have to wait for a response can be a little much, but most of them were good about responding quickly and getting to know you that way as well. I'm not sure how many students actually reach out to the professors in the online situation with that. I felt comfortable enough to send emails and ask, you know, hey, I'm having trouble with number 3 on this. Can you talk me through it? But I'm not sure if other students would be as willing to send an email or ask for help if you didn't have that face-to-face comfort that you had with someone.
That goes back to the self-motivation.
Right.
You have to be.
It's also about your past experiences with education. You were doing this primarily as a graduate student, and the majority of students that are in the online learning setting tend to be undergraduates. That's like 66% of the online learning in the United States. They don't necessarily have the same level of skill that you have. And so that means that an instructor in an undergraduate course may have to be much more intuitive and look at the possibilities of why isn't this person posting on a regular basis and make that contact with that student. So it's a different way that an instructor has to evaluate how they're working with an undergraduate versus a graduate student that has good skills like you do.
I often would transpose my expectations for an online instructor from the ones that I had had both in SEED and in my undergraduate as well. So I often had the same expectations for those online professors in my master's that I had had for those in SEED. Timely responses, answering questions if needed, responding to my posts, making sure that they were engaging back with me. I was investing my time and I wanted to feel as though they had invested theirs as well. So maybe if I hadn't had those prior experiences, it would be very different.
Right.
That's interesting, Angie. I think in the notes that you forwarded, you talked about expectations of the course, of the instructor, and of the students.
Right.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it does vary, but what you really want to do if you are an online faculty member or an online student is you want to have high expectations of one another because you still are looking at a quality experience in the learning. And so what you did was extremely appropriate, but the dilemma for most of our undergraduate students when they're online is that they may not have had prior experiences that were valuable or good experiences even at the K-12 level. And so their knowledge of how to bring forward the right questions at the right time and to be comfortable and confident enough to say, I have this expectation that you will give as much as I give in this experience. And so that's a difficult thing for online students. One of the things that I found in my research was that's sometimes where an online academic advisor can be the absolute best person, the best resource for the faculty member as well as the student to help them connect with one another, because the academic online advisor typically is the person who is they are the face of the online institution for the student, and they're typically the only person that's meeting with that student virtually or in person from the beginning of their enrollment to the end of their degree. And so that's the person that they often will connect with first and say, how do I approach this faculty member about this? I don't know how to do this. And so it's really incredibly important to have good online academic advisors that are very well trained in every aspect of the institution and how to help the students and the faculty work with one another.
So you were an online advisor at Columbia
I was
College.
at Columbia College.
Would you typically give students like Sarah handouts or counseling at first about their expectations?
Yes.
And how
Yes.
to attain?
Absolutely. What you want to do is you really want to spend that time before they even agree to be an online student, that you have a conversation with them about, here are the kinds of things that we expect of you as a student. We have student responsibilities that we expect you to do, but you should also expect these things from this faculty member. And if you don't, we want to know about it because we want you to have a good experience. And so sometimes when you tell a student that, at first they're like, okay, but do you really mean that? Until the first time that a student calls you and says, I have a real problem with this faculty member and I don't know how to resolve this. And I say, okay, let's walk through what you should do here, here, and here. And if that doesn't work, you let me know. And there have been times where we've seen faculty members that have not had their contracts renewed because of that, because it is so critical having that quality relationship when you don't see one another.
I think in some ways you got to be more of a coach than just a traditional faculty member. I mean, you're not going to be lenient on your expectations or anything like that, but you do have to kind of, be willing to work with them one-on-one and say, hey, let's get going here. What do you need to succeed? Why isn't it working? Do you need something different? I think it's just a little bit different approach you have to take, and once again, it just is a different attitude, and maybe it's more collegial, I think, in some ways. It's less that, it's me versus them in a classroom or something, but, they're not out there. It's like we're all in here together. We're all working together to make sure that you master this subject. And so it's really, if you get teachers that are oriented toward teaching for mastery, then I think they're very successful in an online environment.
Yeah.
Scott, what level courses do you teach?
I just have taught the graduate level courses, MBA courses, as well as this summer I was working with an interesting online course that MU does for interns that are actually undergraduate interns in the business school. Mm-hmm. So they have an online course they complete during that time. And so I had about 40 undergraduates then. Mm-hmm. And that's a course that has very high expectations for them, and it's very interesting to see how the students perform, because this is their first time really getting away from school, and they're actually out working this summer, and they're having to balance not only school, but just school and work, and then also how they're learning about I thought I was going to like finance, but I really don't like it at all. Or, I didn't think I'd gonna like sales, but I want to be in sales. This is awesome. I want to sell stuff. So it's very interesting just to see how they're finding their careers. And that is one where they do have a coaching call. What they've done is they've structured this. They have actually many faculty that are teaching this course to handle about 300 or 400 students, and they have a midpoint coaching call. And we also have several opportunities to meet the students one-on-one prior to them departing for the summer. And so I think that just helps them get into that mentality that, hey, I'm here to help them get through this. They can call me if they have a problem on site. Let's work through it. And but once again, keeping those high expectations. And
Sure.
I think some students were surprised when I threw their first paper back and said, "You're going to fail if you turn this in."
So you say 40 in that particular course, the interns course. Is that a typical size? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really for me about as much as I can manage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems high.
And for graduate level courses, probably 20 is a good number for that. There's been some popularity of what they call these MOOCs, or massive online courses. But if you look at those, there's actually like 5% completion rate or something.
Yeah.
So those probably have their place, and they probably have both for institutions and for students. But some people kind of thought this was a new revolution, and I think it's the same thing.
You don't see that.
Right.
Well, since we're looking into our crystal balls here,
Right.
what's the future of online learning? We know that a significant number of students, online students, are non-traditional students. They're holding down careers, want to continue their education. I assume that another slice of online students are just people who don't want to go to the state U. They're interested in getting a degree, but not necessarily going to an MU or a Columbia College.
Yeah.
How will that? Are they going to complement each other? I guess is my question. Is online going to take an increasing
I think if we
importance?
do it right, they will complement one another, because face-to-face and online have good opportunities for learning in different topics, different fields. And I think that there is going to be an increase in online's going to be more common, but that doesn't mean that it's going to overtake face-to-face, or that it's going to be, it may never have the same reputation as face-to-face, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the ones who are attracted to it are attracted for very different reasons than those that are attracted to face-to-face. So I do think that, wouldn't you agree that it is going to continue to increase? We're seeing a lot of
Yeah, and you see a lot of students that are taking a combination
Yep.
of online and in-class. And Moberly Area Community College has more students here in Columbia than they do in Moberly.
Yeah,
But
at their
they
home
still
campus.
have, a taxing district that is the school district of the city of Moberly, right? So I mean, it's how these old institutional structures come out, how they evolve along with, the institutions that are trying to evolve with the student needs. Columbia College has done very well. Is that going to be the same for all of the, small regional colleges around? Or are they going to see increased competition from a satellite campus of Moberly? Or, it'll be interesting. I think that's where we'll see some changes. I think we're going to see progressive evolution of the technology and the acceptance, but I think, it'll be interesting to see if there's any changes that happen at the institutional level.
I think that I would consider it to be like phone calls and text messages. Text messages aren't going to take over for a phone call, but it's going to give me another method to reach my friends or family. So online education can be the text message to the traditional learning's phone call.
Great.
I agree.
Well, we are, believe it or not, out of time. And there you go. I hope that you learned something about online learning. I certainly did. I'd like to thank our guests tonight. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, and I would like to thank CAT TV. I'm Jim Robertson. Good night.